were pretty looking people, but I can tell you people, they were the devil's children.
Greetings from Castle Goring, from Nikki, Aurora, and from me. We have a lot of ground to cover today with very little time. So, if I may, without further ado, I will plunge right in. Christina says, Lady C, is it true that Prince William fed Harry the news that the Queen would be coming to London on the royal train to see if he leaked it? And he did, to Scabies. As we know, the plan was to bring her back by plane. Would be amazing if this was true. Christina, I need to be very careful how I put this. I need to be delicate. This is a very hot topic, and I need to be really careful that I negotiate my way around the shoals, so to speak, without crashing the ship onto the rocks. There is no doubt in any rational person's mind that Harry and Meghan leak confidential, private, personal, and unacceptable matters to the press, and that Amid Scabies is their Goebbels, their minister of propaganda. They're a primary source. And remember, Harry himself wrote that he didn't want his fingerprints to be discovered on the pages of the book Funding Freedom and Finding Freebies. So, Harry and William, let me put it in context, and that will give you an idea of where I'm coming from on this. Harry and William have, as practically everybody does in the public eye, set traps for people who they thought would be leaking information about them. So, if William, and notice the way I'm putting this, did a Wagatha Christie, shades of Colleen Rooney, with the rather distasteful Rebecca Vardy on his brother Harry, and Harry stepped into the trap, and I'm saying if, for very sound legal reasons, to make it absolutely clear that I am not accusing Harry of anything, because I am very attached to my money and my reputation. And Harry and Meghan have the ability to exploit small errors, even though the overall scenario is accurate. There may be one tiny detail wrong, and they're very good at exploiting it to their financial and reputational advantage. And I'm afraid I'm not going to give them the locus to do that where I'm concerned. But is there trust? How could there be trust? There is no trust. I hope I have answered the question in such a way that you appreciate what I believe of what I have been told to be the case. June Corrie says, the one person I feel sorry about is our new Prince of Wales, William. He's lost his little brother when he needed him the most, and I'm sure he has looked after him and stuck up for him in the past. Yes, he has looked after him, he has stuck up for him. As he said, he put his arm around his brother and had protected him for most of his life. And I know what it's like because of a situation that I have been a privy to on a personal level with two siblings, an elder and a younger sister, from a very prominent family. And they were so thick, it was unbelievable while they were growing up. They were like twins. And in their 20s, the elder sister outstripped the younger sister, and the younger sister never forgave her and turned against her and betrayed her affection, let's put it that way. I don't think she betrayed her trust in a worldly sense, but she certainly betrayed her trust in an emotional sense. And I know from my own observation of this situation that it was like a death to the elder sister. It took her decades to come to terms with it. I think it took her about 20 years to come to terms with it. She came to terms with it eventually, but there's very little relationship there now. I mean, there's a superficial relationship, but no profound relationship, which to the elder sister was a tremendous loss. I think there are very definite parallels between that scenario and the Harry and William scenario. I am reliably informed that William feels completely betrayed. You don't, after you've felt betrayed, embrace the Iscariot. Margaret Lilly says, the fact that the despicable duo refused the Queen's invitation to Balmoral tells us exactly what they are. If you cannot find the time to visit your aged grandparent when they are living, you should not, big block capitals, be upfront at their funeral. Well, Margaret Lilly, you shouldn't behave like that if you are a decent, kind, loving person. If you are a crass and vulgar opportunist, that is how you behave. Now, I had been laying the ground in these videos for some time before the Queen's death. I actually had been saying that there were matters afoot and there were certain things going on that I did not want to speak about until Harry and Meghan had returned to America. What I wanted to say, but I wasn't going to tell them by repeating it to the world, was that people in certain circles were outraged by their coldness and callousness because the Queen had asked them, and the instructions at Balmoral were to prepare for their possible arrival. And they had said no. Now, I knew the Queen was dying. Everybody I know, well, everybody within a close circle, not everybody that I know generally, knew that the Queen was dying, that she was really ill. And may I interject at this point and say that she did not actually die of her chronic condition. As often happens in situations like that, she was wafted off by something else. Because in situations like this, people's constitutions are so weakened that they actually die of something else. But the reality is they wouldn't have died of the something else if their constitution hadn't been completely weakened. But nobody actually expected the Queen to die exactly when she did. But certainly, I've been saying for some time now, it would be a miracle if she lasts till the end of this year. And certainly, there's no way she's going to last till the end of next year. If I was in a position to say that, surely you don't believe that Harry was not in a position to know that as well. And the callousness with which they rejected the Queen's invitation, but then nose it up and push themselves forward, all to be participants in the funeral, and then have been briefing against the royal family and against the way they were being treated. And they were being treated perfectly respectfully and respectably. And I will give them their due. Although there were behind the scenes things going on which were maneuverings to grab undue attention, superficially their conduct was not exactly reproachable. I think I'd put it like that. So let's give credit where it's due. However, they have opportunistically taken advantage of his supposedly beloved grandmother's death. But they couldn't visit her. They couldn't take the children to see her, which she wanted. What does that tell you? I know what it tells me. I am at a loss for words as to how Harry and Meghan could have behaved the way they did. Had the Queen not died, I intended, as soon as they had gone back to America, to say, the Queen is very ill. Everybody knows the Queen is very ill. How can Harry and Meghan have come here and not seen the Queen? That's what I was going to say. And how can they have rejected her offer because of bringing their children, because she wanted the pleasure of seeing his children, her great-grandchildren. And I was going to say, and I think I actually have hinted at it, that if the Queen then dies before they come to see her, I don't think their reputations will ever recover from it. But of course, she got ill and died during the intervening period. But go back to the videos and listen to what I was saying. I was laying the ground for what I have just said I intended to say. Corey Jonasson says, Lady C, I have never heard the N-word used ever in the United Kingdom. And Alison Ford says, I agree. I am 58 and have never heard that word said in the UK. Well, I have to tell you, I've heard it said in the UK, but never by, shall we say, classical British, irrespective of their class. I have heard it said by people of West Indian origin. I don't know many Africans, so I don't know if it's a word that is used in the African context, but I can tell you it is a word that is regularly used, less so now than 5 and 10 years ago, but it was a word that was often used, sometimes rather jocularly and sometimes even affectionately, in the West Indian circle, but never by white West Indians, unless they were mentally deficient, emotionally disturbed, drunk, or nasty. But black West Indians and brown West Indians would use it. And in fact, there is a Jamaican variation of the word, which is not as pejorative, that in fact is sometimes affectionate, and that was often used. But it shows that Meghan is the architect of all of this, because since Harry was not mixing in circles where that word was commonly used, but Meghan, being American, is very familiar with that word because it is effectively an Americanism that's alien pretty much to the British vernacular. It's a dead giveaway. So thank you, both of you, for that observation. Anna Pope says, Lady C, how many times does that woman have to be proven to be a liar for these people to open their eyes? It frightens me how many rational and normally discerning people cannot see how poisonous she is. Well, Anna Pope, I actually get why a lot of rational and normally discerning people don't see how poisonous she is. And I'll tell you why. I didn't see how poisonous she was because I wasn't interested enough to even make a cursory examination, much less an in-depth study of the character. I took things at face value, as people often do. So a lot of people, because they're not particularly engaged, unless it hits them in the face, which her conduct has actually hit people in the face and made the scales fall off their eyes. But that has been her asserting herself and ending up creating a discernment in people that they really didn't want to actually arrive at, because she has over-asserted herself. But there are an awful lot of people who are so disengaged that they just take it at face value, and they therefore believe the PR, and they believe that the lies are the truth. So I think, in fairness to certain sorts of people, and I'm not speaking about her die-hard supporters, because I think they're either imbeciles or educationally defective or emotionally disturbed, or a certain category of person in terms of worldly situations and sometimes racial origins. And they are a bag full of irrational prejudices, including the fact that they can never criticize somebody who they regard as a sister. But putting that aside, I get why an awful lot of people, perfectly rational people, as you said, don't see the light. They're just not interested enough to see the light. And so they buy the lie. Annabella Vanden Heuvel says, Lady C, if Harry and Meghan's children were not born from Meghan's body, what are the consequences for Harry and Meghan? I hope you will see my question. I love to watch your conversations and I wait anxiously every day for them. Thank you. And thank you, Annabella Vanden Heuvel, because I hope, our conversations. That's why I read out some of the questions the way I do. So it's not me lecturing, it's us engaged in a conversation. And I'm glad you picked that up. To answer the question, and I'm going to answer it very particularly and get off the subject because it's a hot potato and I'm going to keep on my gloves. To answer your question specifically, if Harry and Meghan's children were not born from Meghan's body, what are the consequences for Harry and Meghan? The consequences would be devastating. If it were so. If it were so. But I am not, for legal reasons, asserting or even suggesting that it is so. Let's put it that way. But if, to answer your question, it were so, the way the situation has developed, if revelation became a reality, to use Meghan's word, it would be unsurvivable reputationally for them. But fortunately, we are not asserting that it is so. And therefore, we are now going to go on to something less speculative and less conditional. Mary Sweeney says, what is fascinating about Meghan? Not her acting, but I feel rather that I am watching a psycho-sociopath in a Lifetime movie. You know, the ones about the stalker female? I'm waiting to see how the story ends. My favourite ending would be that the cops come and take her away to the loony bin. Exclamation mark. Mary Sweeney, and I note you are an American because of your spelling. Certainly, the way the story has developed, her conduct is suggestive enough for you to arrive at that conclusion without anybody being able to say that you irrationally and without any evidence of conduct on her part had behaved in such a way that you would arrive at that conclusion. I'm being very careful what I say, as you can imagine. But yes, movies are very interesting, more interesting when they're negative often than when they're positive, or when they're a mixed bag. You know, we may want to look at something edifying occasionally, but you only need to look at the entertainment industry to see that what is interesting by and large to people is a mixed bag, and even sometimes terribly awful and dreadful things. Ghoulish fascination, but also we are interested in the mechanics of evil, especially if we are not evil. Because we are learning about something that we do not know enough about to skip the lessons. That's one of the main reasons why crime movies, murder mysteries, sociopaths and psychopaths and people of that ilk and their stories are so interesting, and why they are so widespread. Susie Q says, Lady C, you are on fire today. Thank you. I think I was. Thank you. Yes, I was very fired up. Question. Finishing your book on Diana and the similarities between her behavior and the things she said about the royal family. That is, they never helped me when I joined the family, and the things Megalodon says is amazing to me. Do you think Megalodon will eventually turn on Harry and try to manipulate the royal family in the same way? I appreciate your thoughts. That is a very interesting question. I do not think that Diana was a narcissist. My own take on her is that she was not a narcissist, which doesn't mean that she didn't have narcissistic features to her personality. Most beautiful, well-bred women who are very successful have pretty strong egos. Well, maybe that's not the right word. Pretty large egos. Because there's a difference between a large ego and a strong ego. And many of them do exhibit some narcissistic features to their personality without being narcissists. Narcissism is simply self-love taken to a grossly unhealthy and unacceptable level. But good ego structure requires a degree of self-love. If you look at it like that, Meghan and Diana both have exhibited very manipulative and very crafty ways of behavior, and very attention-seeking and very blaming everybody else forms of behavior. And Diana used to turn on people. And Meghan certainly devours her own. She's devoured everybody of consequence with very few exceptions. And the few exceptions, and I'm speaking about from her past, and the few exceptions whom she has not devoured are useful to her. Will she eventually turn on Harry? Who says she hasn't already on occasion? And who says that she isn't playing a very canny game where Harry is the stalking horse? Some of the PR doesn't show Harry in a flattering light. And she is very careful that her PR shows her in what she perceives to be a flattering light. The reason why it's not flattering is that too many people are onto the fact that she's a $3 bill posing as a sovereign. Louis Robinson says, has Meghan considered what will happen when inevitably she has a serious tiff with Amid Scabies? Sorry, he says Omid Scobie. Who's Omid Scobie? Aurora, Mickey, who is Omid Scobie? And fires him. Her track record indicates this will, big block capitals, happen. Knowledge gives him great power. I bet he's keeping a journal. It's his retirement fund. His tell-all book will make Tom Bowers look like the Beano. I await its publication with bated anticipation. Louis Robinson, you might be onto something. Well, let us see if they fall out. Because Meghan actually has a very good ability to park people and do it in such a way that they don't reveal the reality about her. Or if they do, they only reveal the partial reality. But sometimes her behavior has induced such humiliation in them, and I'm now thinking of Trev, amongst others, that they would sooner chop off their right arm than let anybody know the reality of how they were played. That's absolute humiliation. And it is her insurance as she continues cutting a swathe through life. Dawn Rolfe says, Lady C, just want to thank you so much for your program. Your comments are always truthful and relevant. I respect you so much. Thank you. The terrible verbal mutterings made by Has and Migraine have surely bullied both our lovely Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth to an earlier death. To have suffered the humiliation and degradations of the foul rhetoric uttered by those two must have hurt greatly. They worked so hard to make their reign a success. I honestly do not know how Harry and Meghan can comfortably look at themselves in a mirror. They are distasteful and disgusting. God bless and watch over them. My love, Dawn Rolfe. Well, Dawn Rolfe, I think it's very nice of you to ask God to watch over Meghan and Harry. And hopefully he will do it so well that they will have a Damascene moment and turn away from the path to Tarsus and maybe take the path to Jerusalem instead, if I may wax a little bit enthusiastic biblically. Yes, their conduct did defile, sully, demean, diminish the last days of both their grandparents, his grandparents. And you can imagine the bewilderment, the perplexity, and the befuddlement that both these old people felt as Harry and Meghan ensured that their last days on this earth would be compromised in the most dreadfully, emotionally unacceptable and painful way, disenchanting way. And yes, grandparents who love a grandchild and the grandchild they know has issues will take consolation in the fact that the grandchild is troubled and that they are disturbed and that maybe they have chosen badly, but that hopefully their heart is in the right place. But it's very painful. And I know from people who were told just how painful it was. Tragic. And also that Harry and Meghan would have attacked not only the family and done it so flagrantly and publicly, but attacked the monarchy and the Commonwealth and undermined their life's work. Can you imagine how they felt? I can. Janice Chadwick says, I feel sorry for Harry when he realizes what his and his wife's behavior did to both of his grandparents in the last months and days of their lives. They deserved much better treatment than they got from the Sussexes in those last months and days. I have repeated this because Janice Chadwick has in a few words said what many of you have said. It is amazing that Harry and Meghan's supporters can feel that they would have justification for behaving the way they did and causing such grief and anguish to his grandparents. The hyacinth bouquet of Montecito, Montdeceito, Megraine, Snarkle. Some of these names, that's very droll. I wish the Daily Mail and other tabloids would publish the clip of me Grain's 3 Second, cry on command, brag. Well, my dear, you can wish that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, and it will come true, or you can wish that it rises in the west and sets in the east, and it's never going to happen. I am afraid that the Mail and the other tabloids don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg by being too revelatory about how dreadful some of their opinions of Harry and Meghan are. Of course, on the odd occasion when the Mail has tried to do it, it's cack-handedly done it in such a way that Meghan has been able to exploit the situation legally. Of course, she didn't prevail and succeed in the way the public thinks she did, because remember how many damages she got, and she had to pay some of her own costs. Let's remember that. They weren't unexpurgated and exclusive successes, but successful enough for her to be able to cause trouble. And no newspaper wants to have to waste its time fighting lawsuits unless it is in their political interests and worldly interests to do so. For instance, the way the Mirror set me up and the way they are fighting my case against them, even though they don't have a leg to stand on. But that's unusual. So Meghan is taking full advantage of the legal realities. And that tells you that Harry is involved as well, because Meghan had no real knowledge of how the British press and the media work until she and Harry knocked heads together and came up with moolah, 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 or reputation. Let's get as much publicity as we can and try to make ourselves a shed load of money. Herb Foda says, Lady Campbell, like Alexander Solzhenitsyn said it best in his book called Warning to the West, some people have surrendered to lies, and the Meghan saga is proof of it. I couldn't agree more, but I also think that sufficient people have not surrendered to lies to be using it instructively. So I don't think that it is totally a wasted effort. And let us remember that many people have made the comment that the Meghan and Harry saga has shone a light on the work of the other royals and on what sterling characters they are, that they would never have noticed otherwise. So there is good coming forth from evil. Linda Heath says, Lady C, it was a remarkable ceremony for the Queen, but why is it that lunatics have a louder voice these days than the educated? The media seems to be the thickest of them all. Well, they're in the business of making money. They are also in the business of influencing public opinion. It's not just about news. It's a fight for the souls and the pockets of the public. And I'm going to answer this with recourse to Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky, the great Dostoevsky, the great Russian 19th century writer, who said, or maybe even wrote, but nobody knows where it's found, so it's obvious he must have only said it. Tolerance will reach such a level that intelligent people will be banned from thinking so as not to offend the imbeciles. This is where we are, or where the illiberal neo-Puritans would like us to be, and this is their objective, and they have come perilously close to having caused it, because they have until recently created what appeared to be an unstoppable, intolerant cancel culture, where if you didn't agree with them and their totalitarian authoritarianism, you were to be shut down, because they were going to be espousing tolerance to such an extent that nobody had the right to think. But we were supposed to swallow their BS, and as it clattered down our throats, we were supposed to shriek delightedly, "Geronimo, what wonderful chocolate ice cream!" when we knew it was anything but. Then Dostoevsky says, "I must add my gratitude to you for the attention with which you have listened to me, for, from my numerous observations, our liberals are never capable of letting anyone else have a conviction of his own without at once meeting their opponent with abuse or even something worse." That's from The Idiot. Resonant? Except I regard myself as a liberal. I have many friends, and we are liberals. We are the ones who were free thinking and final products of the Enlightenment, to the extent that we argued for and tried to create a liberal society, which we did, and it has been hijacked by the illiberals posing as liberals. But when Dostoevsky was writing this, the liberals were a political organization that did claim to represent liberalism. And Dostoevsky was making the point that they were extremely intolerant of anybody who didn't agree with them. Does that sound familiar? Because he then says, pain and suffering are always inevitable for a large intelligence and a deep heart. The rarely great men must, I think, have great sadness on earth. In other words, pain and suffering have spiritual necessities and are at times necessary for spiritual growth. A life dedicated to pleasure, a life sybaritic and pleasure-seeking, is a life that condemns you to triviality and false gods. He also says in Crime and Punishment, it takes something more than intelligence to act intelligently. Well, Meghan has intelligence, but does she act intelligently? I would put it to you that she doesn't, because every aim of success ultimately gets scuppered by failure. And we end with the brothers Karamazov. He says, the world says you have needs, satisfy them. And this is really very appropriate for today. You have as much right as the rich and the mighty. Don't hesitate to satisfy your needs. Indeed, expand your needs and demand more. This is the worldly doctrine of today, and they believe that this is freedom. The result for the rich is isolation and suicide, for the poor, envy and murder. I couldn't agree more, and the late Queen's life is an absolute example to us of the truth of this, because the fact of the matter is you have to embrace a cause and a destiny and a belief system where you are a part of a greater whole, and that you aim to be good and to do good. And if you don't understand that you cannot and should not even want to always satisfy what you regard as your needs, and really what are your desires, and that you need a degree of self-abnegation in life to embrace a truer purpose, which is to be a good and decent, life-enhancing person. If you can't self-abnegate to that extent, you don't have a hope in heaven or hell of achieving anything but superficial success and profound failure. Genevieve Beatrice Huang says, obviously Meghalaya showed herself up with her cute hair. If she was really saddened, then real sorrow would result in natural crying, which should be from both eyes. N'est-ce pas? Very well observed, my dear. And Constantina says, yes, her tear was conjured up when she knew the cameras would be on her. I have seen Meghan genuinely tearful on the balcony at the 2019 Trooping the Colour when Harry admonished her to turn around for the national anthem. In that instance, she was genuinely upset and on the verge of tears. It looks nothing like her serene one-tear performance from the funeral. At this point, I will say, anybody who is tears up in such a way that all sorts of facial expressions are being hinted at even when you try to keep your face in repose. If you keep your face in absolute repose, as she did, and you have no expression except that of a tragedian pretending to be suffering, it's as true as a $3 bill. S. Felder says, never seen anyone just have one tear to fall. Must be a miracle. And Louise McCoy observes, rather drolly, has anyone tested that tear for venom? Louise Trott says, painful to watch H&M as they destroy themselves. I agree entirely. And just today I had a thought that I was starting to have the same sense of tragedy and disaster that I felt in the last months of the life of his mother Diana. Her increasingly erratic public behaviour during the Dodi era was deeply worrying, even frightening. I couldn't help feeling this woman is heading for disaster at speed, and I just feel it won't end well. When Diana died, I was so shocked, but when I heard the circumstances, I wasn't so surprised. She was running with the wild horses, and it only led to disaster. Right now, I am starting to feel fearful for Harry. How can it all end if they keep their damaging pressure on everyone who has been kind and loving to them? They are simply destroying themselves. I don't give a damn about Meghan, but it's such a tragedy to see Harry ruin everything meaningful in his life. Well, I think you're basically onto something. I have to say, your comments echo my sentiments to an extent. I think Meghan is a total study in calculated artifice. And I think she has no real feelings for anyone or anything except her ambitions and desires and herself, but not her soul self, but her projected self image of what she wants to believe she is and achieve. This cannot continue indefinitely without something giving. You can only blow up a balloon so much before it bursts. You can only gorge yourself so much before your stomach bursts if you never stop gorging yourself. I don't see this ending prettily either. Sad but true. Just my interpretation says, when the doctors called and told the royal family that the Queen's health was failing, it was a private time for immediate blood family only. Most people only want close loved ones with them when they take their last breath. That's why only Harry was invited. If he had respected his grandmother, he would not have argued the point of his wife, who caused the Queen a lot of upset, being there. It just shows yet again Harry was thinking of his and Meghan's needs first, before the dignity of his grandmother. Well, may I make the point that by the time Harry was called in, it was inevitable that the Queen was going to die very shortly. Out of good taste, I don't want to go into too much nitty-gritty, but the Queen took a sudden turn on the morning of her death that made it inevitable that she would die relatively quickly. I don't want to say more than that. I knew it. Harry had to have known it. He also will have known that she wasn't going to be having any bedside chats. Therefore, infiltrating Meghan was really imposing Meghan. because Meghan needs to be at the centre of all activity, and he goes along with it because Harry and Meghan are a double act. They are Folly Adair. They are Bonnie and Clyde. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and remember, please keep the questions and comments coming in. This cannot be done without you, especially when we're speaking about such great lovers, true lovers as Harry and Meghan, hand-holding, middle-aged, true love. Isn't it wonderful? God bless and goodbye.